On the morning of June 7th, 1992, three vehicles sat parked in the driveway of a single-story home on East Delmar Street in Springfield, Missouri. Nothing appeared disturbed. No broken windows, no forced entry. Inside, personal belongings remained exactly where they should have been. But the three women who had been inside that house only hours earlier were gone. There were no packed bags, no missing vehicles, no written note. Three purses were found together inside. Each still contained identification, keys, cash. If they had left voluntarily, they had done so without the basic items required for even a short trip. A small dog remained inside, unharmed. The front door was unlocked, the porch light globe was shattered, and several incoming voicemail messages had been erased before police secured the scene. There were no confirmed signs of struggle, no reports of gunshots. Three adults vanished from a quiet residential neighborhood overnight. Sherrill Levitt, Suzanne Streeter, Stacy McCall, and for more than 30 years, no one has been held accountable. June 6, 1992, was high school graduation night in Springfield. Suzanne Streeter and Stacy McCall attended their ceremony earlier that day at Kickapoo High School. The evening was spent moving between graduation gatherings. Friends later described the atmosphere as typical, informal, crowded, loosely organized. The original plan was for the two to stay at a friend's home, but sometime after 2 a.m., that plan changed. Shortly after 2:15 a.m., witnesses saw them leave the final gathering. They were driving Suzanne's vehicle. The drive to the Levitt residence should have taken no more than 15 minutes. There are no verified reports of roadside incidents, no confirmed stops, no mechanical breakdown. Based on the timeline, they likely arrived home around 2:30 a.m. Suzanne's mother, Sherrill Levitt, was believed to have been inside. After that point, there are no confirmed external sightings of any of the three women. And whatever occurred next happened within a quiet residential neighborhood, during a window of time when no one reported hearing anything unusual. On the morning of June 7th, Stacy McCall was expected to meet friends at a local water park. When she failed to arrive and could not be reached by phone, concern developed gradually. Calls were placed to Suzanne's home. No answer. Later that morning, friend Janelle Kirby and her boyfriend drove to the residence. All three vehicles were still in the driveway. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the television was on. Interior lights remained illuminated. Three purses sat together. Personal items appeared undisturbed. The household dog was inside, alive, calm. Nothing appeared violently disrupted. Janelle and her boyfriend entered under the assumption the women were temporarily away. They moved through the house, answered phone calls, and in at least one instance, handled debris near the broken porch light. At that moment, the residence was not considered a potential crime scene. Multiple individuals entered before law enforcement secured it. If trace evidence existed inside that house, it may have been unknowingly altered within the first few hours. And that possibility would later complicate every theory that followed. There are several details that complicate reconstruction. First, the purses. All three were left inside. For a voluntary departure, this is inconsistent. For a planned relocation, it makes little sense. Second, the vehicles. All remained at the property. If someone removed the women, that person either arrived with transportation or compelled them into a vehicle that has never been identified. Third, the porch light. The glass globe was shattered. Some accounts suggest the debris had been cleared. It remains unclear whether that damage occurred before the disappearance or after. Fourth, the voicemail messages. Incoming messages were reportedly erased. Who erased them and at what time remains unknown. Their contents are lost. That represents a permanent evidentiary gap. And finally, the absence of disruption. No overturned furniture, no confirmed blood evidence made public, no signs of chaotic struggle. If force was used, it was controlled. If deception was involved, it was effective. And if the women left under pressure, it happened without visible resistance. Law enforcement was formally notified later on June 7th. By the time officers arrived, multiple civilians had already entered the residence. The original scene was no longer untouched. Investigators searched the property and surrounding area. No signs of forced entry were identified. No publicly confirmed blood evidence. No clear indication of violent struggle. Neighborhood canvassing began. No reports of gunshots. No confirmed screams. No verified sightings of suspicious vehicles during the relevant window. Authorities treated the disappearance as suspicious early on, but without a body, without visible violence, and without a defined point of exit, classification became complicated. The case shifted from missing persons to suspected abduction. Media coverage intensified. Tips began arriving in volume. Speculation expanded. But the physical evidence inside the house remained limited. Investigators were left with a residence that suggested interruption, without clearly documenting how that interruption occurred. And that ambiguity would shape the investigation for decades. Because the central question was no longer only who was responsible, but whether the crime even began inside that house at all. Within days, the investigation shifted from missing persons to suspected abduction. The absence of visible violence inside the home did not eliminate foul play. Instead, it narrowed the possibilities. Either the women left under false pretenses, they were coerced without visible resistance, or the primary event occurred outside the residence entirely. Detectives began examining known associates and prior relationships. Sherrill Levitt had recently separated from her husband and maintained an active social life. Investigators reviewed whether anyone familiar with the home may have had access or reason to visit late at night. No former partner was publicly linked to the disappearance. Attention then turned to a vehicle. Multiple witnesses reported seeing an older model green Dodge van in the neighborhood during the early morning hours. Descriptions varied: light green, dull green, parked, moving slowly. Authorities requested information. No confirmed identification of the van's owner was ever announced. The lead generated attention, but not resolution. Another figure emerged after media coverage intensified. A local gravedigger contacted authorities and implied knowledge of the crime. He was questioned. His claims lacked verifiable substance. He was later cleared. In the first year alone, investigators processed hundreds of tips. Many were inconsistent, some fabricated, others impossible to corroborate. The core problem remained unchanged. There was no confirmed forensic anchor, no publicly released blood evidence, no confirmed vehicle tied to removal, no weapon, no digital trail. This was 1992. The investigation relied heavily on interviews and witness memory. And memory, especially after intense media exposure, becomes unstable. As coverage expanded, so did distortion. Rumors circulated. Unverified confessions surfaced. Each required attention. Each consumed resources. Despite early momentum, the case widened rather than narrowed. There was still no definitive evidence placing an offender inside the home, and no confirmed evidence placing the women alive outside it after approximately 2:30 a.m. At this stage, one question became central. If the women reached the house safely, how could 3 adults disappear without visible disturbance? The Levitt residence was typical: single-story, bedrooms off a central hallway, front entry visible from the street. There was no confirmed forced entry, so either the door was unlocked or it was opened voluntarily. The broken porch light complicates that sequence. There is no confirmed timestamp for when it shattered. Reports suggest the women prepared for sleep, makeup removed, clothing set out for the next day. Normal behavior. If someone arrived after they settled in, the logistical problem intensifies. How do you control 3 adults without noise? How do you prevent resistance? How do you remove them without visible struggle? One explanation is deception. If the door was opened voluntarily, the encounter may have begun without alarm. Another is rapid compliance under immediate threat. The purses suggest interruption, not preparation. Whatever occurred likely happened quickly, and it likely required cooperation, voluntary or coerced, which raises a destabilizing possibility. The house may not have been where control was established. It may only have been the last confirmed location. To evaluate whether the primary event occurred elsewhere, investigators revisited the final confirmed movements before 2:30 a.m. Suzanne and Stacy left a crowded gathering shortly after 2:15 a.m. Crowded environments create observational gaps. Who saw them leave? Who left at the same time? Was anyone watching? There were no verified reports of a vehicle following them, but absence of report is not confirmation of absence. If they were intercepted before reaching the house, one problem immediately emerges. Their vehicle was found parked at the residence, which strongly suggests they arrived home, unless someone else drove it there. That would require access to keys, familiarity with the route, and confidence in approaching a residential street in the early morning hours. No publicly confirmed evidence supports that scenario. So the working reconstruction remains. They reached the house, and something happened after. That conclusion narrows the offender profile. It suggests someone willing to approach an occupied home at night, someone confident, someone deliberate. Removing 3 adults without visible struggle implies planning, not impulse, not random burglary, but calculated engagement. As media coverage intensified, one detail began to dominate discussion: a green van. Multiple witnesses reported seeing an older model Dodge van in the neighborhood during the early morning hours of June 7th. Descriptions varied slightly: light green, dull green, parked briefly, moving slowly. Some accounts suggested it appeared to circle the area. Law enforcement publicly requested information. From an investigative standpoint, vehicle sightings in high-profile cases present a recurring problem. Once a description enters public circulation, retrospective sightings increase. Ordinary vehicles become suspicious in hindsight. That does not invalidate the reports, but it complicates reliability. Investigators attempted to identify owners of vans matching the description in the Springfield area. No publicly confirmed arrest resulted directly from this lead. There were no publicly released tire impressions, no confirmed physical transfer evidence linking a specific van to the residence. The green van became a symbol of the case, visible, discussed, but never anchored to forensic proof. And as tip volume expanded, including distant sightings, burial claims, and unverifiable confessions, the investigation widened again. But widening is not the same as resolving. As the investigation matured, certain patterns became clear. No confirmed forensic evidence tied a specific individual to the interior of the home. No weapon was publicly identified. No verified vehicle was linked to removal. And no confirmed sighting placed the 3 women alive after approximately 2:30 a.m. The absence of physical anchors narrowed possibilities, but it did not eliminate them. If the offender was known to the victims, entry could have been voluntary. If the encounter began under deception, resistance may have been delayed. If control was established immediately, disruption could have been minimal. But each scenario depends on timing, and timing remains the most fragile element in the reconstruction. There is no confirmed timestamp for the broken porch light. No confirmed record of the erased voicemail contents. no confirmed moment when the home transitioned from ordinary to compromised, which leaves a structural vulnerability in the case. The first confirmed anomaly occurs in the morning. Everything before that exists in a narrow, silent window. And in that window, 3 adults disappeared without a verified trace. The Springfield disappearance does not lack public attention. It lacks confirmation. The physical scene suggests interruption, but not chaos. The timeline suggests arrival, but not departure. The leads suggest possibility, but not proof. More than 3 decades later, the house on East Delmar Street remains the last confirmed location. But confirmation is not explanation. If the event began inside the residence, it required precision. If it began outside, it required coordination. In either case, it required confidence. And whatever occurred in the early hours of June 7th, 1992, left behind almost nothing. 3 vehicles remained. 3 purses remained. A dog remained. But Sherrill Levitt, Suzanne Streeter, and Stacy McCall did not. And in the absence of definitive evidence, the case remains what it has always been. This is the incomplete file.